good morning. We conclude Zechariah today, chapters 8 to 14, which contains a number of prophecies about Messiah. Reading from chapter 8, verse 1, the coming peace and prosperity of Israel. Again the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, I was zealous for Zion with great jealousy, and I was jealous for her with great fury. Thus saith Yahweh, I am returned unto Zion, and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called a city of truth, and the mountain of Yahweh of hosts, the holy mountain. Verse 7. Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, Behold, I will save my people from the east country and from the west country, and I will bring them, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God, in truth and in righteousness. Verse 13. And it shall come to pass that as you were accursed among the heathens, O house of Judah and house of Israel, so will I save you, and you shall be a blessing. Fear not, but let your hands be strong. For thus saith Yahweh, the God of hosts, as I thought to punish you when your fathers provoked me to wrath, saith Yahweh of hosts, I repented not. So again have I thought in these days to do well unto Jerusalem and to the house of Judah, fear you not. These are the things that you shall do. Speak you every man truth to his neighbor, execute judgment of truth and peace in your gates. And let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor, and love no false oath, for all these are things that I hate, saith Yahweh. 8:23. Thus saith Yahweh, the God of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of the languages of the nations, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, saying, We will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. My comment. Truth is of utmost importance in the Bible, which mentions it hundreds of times. Worship in spirit and truth, as it says in the New Testament, not only spirit, and definitely not by traditions of men or denominations. Learning is from the Jews, not vice versa, as Christians think. From what God gave them to show as light to other nations. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 12. For the time you ought to be teachers, you have need that one teach you again, which be the first principle of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk, and not of strong meat. Consideration for the Christians today. Acts chapter 7:38. This is he that was in the church in the wilderness with the angel which spake to him in the Mount Sinai with our fathers, who received the lively oracles to give unto us. Again, Paul speaking that the original church started in the wilderness, and they got the things to pass on to the church of Paul's time and of today, i.e. taking hold of the skirt of the Jew. Romans chapter 3, verse 1. What advantage then hath the Jew? Much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. That is the source of your faith and the source of your olive tree and the teachings. Not the traditions of the Jews or Judaism, but the commandments and oracles of God. Judgment on Israel's enemies, chapter 9, verses 1 to 8. The burden of the word of Yahweh in the land of Hadrach and Damascus, and it goes on. My comment. This first burden are Syria, Philistia, and Phoenicia, used to represent all Israel's eschatological enemies. The same way the nation of Assyria was used in Micah's prophecy. See Micah chapters 5 verses 3 to 9 and Daniel chapters 11 verses 1 to 20. So I'm going to jump on to verse 9, the coming King of Israel, or Zion. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, the King come unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, the foal of an ass. My comment. The King who came riding on an ass is Yeshua the Messiah. Matthew chapters 21 verse 5, John chapters 1 verse 49, 12 verse 15, Luke chapters 19 verse 38, Isaiah chapters 62 verse 11, Zechariah chapters 2 verse 10, Jeremiah chapters 2 verses 5 and 30 verse 9. He is said to be just, as are God's commandments. Romans chapter 7 verse 12, wherefore the law is holy, and the commandment holy and just and good. A couple of days ago I gave you the similarities between the Messiah and the law, showing that they are one and the same. One is written and one is in the flesh. Continuing from chapter 9 verse 14, Yahweh will save his people. And Yahweh shall be seen over them, and his arrow shall go forth as the lightning, and Yahweh shall blow the trumpet, and shall go with whirlwinds of the south. Yahweh, God of hosts, shall defend them. Moving on to chapter 10, the restoration of Judah and Israel, reading from verse 2 and reading verse 3, a couple of verses. For the idols have spoken vanity, and the diviners have seen a lie, and have told false dreams. They comfort in vain. Therefore they went their way as a flock. They were troubled, because there was no shepherd. Mine anger was kindled against the shepherds, and I punished the goats. For Yahweh, the God of hosts, hath visited his flock, the house of Judah, and hath made them as his goodly horse in the battle. My comment. Who resembles the false dreamers, and those that decree this and that? Speakers of comfort, the shepherds who kindle God's anger and will be separated as goats from his sheep. The same way many prosperity pastors separate you from your money. 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 13. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. A couple of verses of chapter 11, the foolish shepherds, reading from chapter 11 verse 12. And I said unto them, if you think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price, so they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. And Yahweh said unto me, cast it into the Continuing, Zechariah chapters 8 verse 14, reading from chapter 11 verse 13. And Yahweh said unto me, cast it into the potter, cast it unto the potter, a goodly price that I was prized at of them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of Yahweh. My comment. Verse 12 speaks of Judas's betrayal of Yeshua. Judas's betrayal of Judah. According to the law, 30 shekels was the price the owner of an ox was to pay as compensation in the event it gored another man's slave. See this in Exodus chapters 21 verse 32 and Matthew chapters 26 verses 14 to 16. The money did go to the potter of the field, Matthew 27 verses 9 to 10. These comparisons between Old and New Testament you may know because the Old Testament wording has been explained to you via the New. What many lack is detailed knowledge of the old to show that everything in the new came from the old. That's talking about teachings of the apostles. No teachings were changed, not even by Yeshua. Nothing added or taken away. Laws of God were not changed or cancelled. Neither were his days of worship. Leviticus 23, the weekly Sabbath, from sunset Friday evening to sunset Saturday evening, and I said all the others listed in Leviticus 23. Continuing from Zechariah chapters 11 verse 16. For lo, I will raise up a shepherd in the land, which shall not visit those that be cut off. Neither shall seek the young one, nor heal that which is broken, nor feed that standeth still, but he shall eat the flesh of the fat, and tear the claws in pieces, and tear their claws in pieces. My comment: the shepherd, the Messiah, is not for those cut off, nor blotted out. As I said, in 2018 we are in the period of the feast days. Today being the Feast of Tabernacles, the first day of Feast of Tabernacles.
That's for another year.
The first and the last of which are holy convocations and Sabbaths, days of non-work. God says whoever does not keep it will be cut off. So that was the Day of Atonement, which was a few days ago. To be cut off means from the Messiah's sacrifice and atonement. See also other reasons for being cut off or blot out in a study called Cut Off Blot Out on the website forwardtoyahweh.com. Chapter 12. Jerusalem's enemies will be destroyed, verse 1. The burden of the word of Yahweh. And it goes on, verse 9. And it shall come to pass that in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come up against Jerusalem. Verse 12, in whom they have pierced. So chapter 12 verse 10. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. So again, the house of David, the Messiah came by that house, and the verse talks about who gets the spirit of grace and who will be cut off above, and so on. So note to whom the prophecy is to, and therefore when we come to New Testament, others cannot claim something that wasn't prophesied to them. Here's another example of how those unlearned in the Old Testament misuse the New. God said he would pour out on specific people the Spirit of grace. Paul in the New Testament explains some of the old prophecies. He talks about a new covenant being given to Israel, not like one given to Israel and Judah. It's in Hebrews chapters 8 verses 8 to 10, and Zechariah chapters 8 verses 8. The difference is he would put the law in their hearts. This is from Hebrews. He repeats this in chapters 10 verse 16. Then a few verses later mentions the prophesied spirit of grace. Those ignorant of the source of this teaching in the Old Testament apply it to themselves or universally rather than to the given specifically mentioned people. Hebrews chapters 10 verse 29. Of how much surer punishment suppose he be thought worthy, who have trodden on the foot the Son of God, and have counted the blood of the covenant wherewith he was sanctified, an unholy thing, and have done despite unto the Spirit of grace. 2 Peter chapters 3:16. Some people do the same with Acts chapters 2, speaking in tongues. those were prophecies given by the prophets, especially Joel, that Peter mentions, and we'll see it is specifically to Israel and Judah, not every believer. Chapter 13, the shepherd, the Messiah, struck. Reading from verse 7. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith Yahweh, God of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, and I will turn mine hand upon the little ones. Verse 8. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith Yahweh, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. And I will bring the third part through the fire, and I will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people. So I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, Yahweh is my God. My comment. They will say, Yahweh. See Isaiah chapters 40 verse 11, Ezekiel 34:23, John 10:30, 14 verse 10 to 11, Matthew 18:10 and 14, and 26:31, Mark chapters 14:27, Luke chapters 12 verse 32, Romans 11:5, and 1 Peter chapters 1 verse 1 and 6 to 7, and others too many to mention. Verse 14, chapter 14, the coming day of Yahweh, or the Messiah, reading from verse 1. Behold, the day of Yahweh cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the house rifled, and women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall Yahweh go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of battle. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof, towards the east and towards the west, and there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove towards the north, and half of it towards the south. Verse 9. And Yahweh shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall there be one master, and his name one. Verse 12. And this shall be the plague wherewith Yahweh will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. Verse 16. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, Yahweh, the God of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, Yahweh, the God of hosts, even unto them shall be no rain. And if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague wherewith Yahweh will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And in that day shall there be upon the bells of the horses holiness unto Yahweh. And the pots of Yahweh's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. Yea, every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness unto Yahweh, the God of hosts. And all of they that sacrifice shall come and take of them, and seeth therein. And in that day there shall be no more the Canaanite in the house of Yahweh, the God of hosts. first day of the Feast of Tabernacles in 2018. Those who do not will be punished and get no rain, which is the source of nourishment. The laws that God applies to nations can also apply to individuals who, in the future, as they should be doing now, do not keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Shalom until tomorrow, God willing.